Look! Look, the dynamic duo!
Hey guys, welcome to the Dynamic Duo. I hope you guys like this new set that I have. Let me know if you prefer this view from the other view. But anyway, welcome to the Dynamic Duo. I'm Franz.
I'm Kevin. Welcome back to Avengers Tower and the Batcave, ladies and gentlemen. And today, it's more Batcave than ever.
It's Batcave today because we are reviewing the Batman. And we saw it last night. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. If I may, allow me to go first. What we're going to do is we're going to do a non-spoiler review as well as a spoiler review. And I think you have more to say than I do. So, as the Batman aficionado and expert of the team, I think your opinion definitely matters. And based on some of the things you said yesterday, very, very interesting observation. So here's what I'm thinking. My review of the Batman. The first thing is our show is a show about objectivity, and we have to be fair, and we have to be true, and we have to be honest. And my review of the Batman is this. I think it is an excellent movie that was extremely well directed. What I mean by that is that there are some movies where scenes are done and they're either done in a weak way that doesn't work, they're either done in a way that is normal, it's perfectly fine, and there are other scenes that are directed, simple scenes that are directed in a way that maximizes the scene. It's very much the same way as comic book art. You know, some comic book artists could take a conversation and somehow make it impactful, whereas some comic book artists can take a very dramatic scene and make it seem boring and stupid and weak. And I have to credit Matt Reeves for being an excellent director. I think that every scene was interesting. Every scene was powerful, well done, well directed, good cinematography. There was no problem with respect to that. I thought the movie was also very interesting. Compelling. I'm going to go and say compelling. I did find myself trying to stay awake, but I say that just to admit that that's what happened, but I don't say it as a reflection of the movie. I'm not saying that it was boring and that's why I was sleeping, but I did find myself struggling to stay awake throughout the movie. No reflection on the movie. Perhaps I was tired. Perhaps who knows what was going on. Another thing is that my objection of the Batman material wasn't as extreme as I thought it would be. I kind of liked the presentation of this Batman. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked powerful. I liked his height, his power, his width, his size. There were some issues about whether or not he was going to be big enough and muscular enough. I had no issues with respect to that. And so there were a lot of positives through this movie. It turned out to be pretty much what I thought it would be, which is to say a very well presented film that didn't necessarily tickle my fancy. One credit that I must give is Zoe Kravitz. Zoe Kravitz, in my opinion, blew it out of the park. I mean, I've never seen someone sort of capture a character the way that I've seen her capture Catwoman. She just really just personalized that character in a way that I think she's gonna blow up because of this movie. So these are all the positives. The negatives are, generally speaking, Kevin, the movie was an alternate version of Batman. And I found myself accepting that. I found myself not thinking of that as a negative. Batman, perhaps more than any other character, leaves himself, because of Frank Miller and because it leaves himself to be interpreted. There have been many different Batman in the comics, you know, old Gotham Batman, 1860s Batman, and all kinds of different Batmen. And that's been okay. And I found myself thinking of that movie as one of those. And as such, because of the presentation, because it was interesting, it was actually acceptable to me. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, for me, that they did something, and this is a non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to reveal. If you guys are interested, or if you've already seen the movie, we'll talk about it in our spoiler review. But they did something that, in my opinion, just crossed the line. And it made me less appreciate this movie. It made me not want to count it as one of my favorite movies. One of the ways, and I guess I do have a lot to say about it, forgive me, but comparing it to The Dark Knight, and I know you're not a big fan of The Dark Knight, I much prefer The Dark Knight. Forget about the crossing the line situation. But I prefer The Dark Knight as a movie. I found The Dark Knight to be more compelling, more interesting, more exciting, more cool, more a lot of things than this movie. What they did with, without giving too many spoilers, with Thomas and Martha Wayne, to me was, it's a matter of the approach is the deconstruction of the characters. And I get that you want to tell your version of the character. I get that, and I respect it. But the idea of deconstructing the character to such an extent and to reinvent him or her to such an extent, to me, is lazy, and it's cheap, and it's beneath. It destroys the core of the character a little bit too much. There's more to say, but that's my review. Very well delivered movie. I liked a lot of aspect of it, but overall, it didn't tickle my fancy. What's your thing?
I'll start out nice and easy, or as close to nice and easy as I can get. I have to agree with you on several different points and on several different levels. I enjoyed it, but like you, I enjoyed the movie with reservation. Okay. Artistically and directing wise, I thought Matt Reeves did an outstanding job with his interpretation of the world of Batman and Gotham City. The reason why I say his interpretation is because that's exactly what it was. As you pointed out, there have been so many different iterations of Batman throughout history and throughout the decades. This one works, in my opinion, on several different levels, but for one major reason. This is a Batman for this portion of the generation. It's more of a gothic Batman world. It felt like watching one of the Alex Cross dramas from Seven, Kiss the Girls.
Yes.
Along Came a Spider.
Yes.
That type of thing.
Yes.
I thought a lot of how that was intercut and how that was interwoven into a number of the pieces of the story, thought that was brilliant.
Yes.
Because it did feel like that.
Yes.
At the same time, and I'll wait for the other half of the review. Some of what was done within that space, I thought was a mistake. Like you, I truly believe that Zoe Kravitz ran away with the movie. I truly do. I told you that last night. Yeah. She put a spin on Catwoman, not to take anything away from Michelle Pfeiffer, and not to take anything away from anybody else who's done the character. Okay, or voiced the character, as in the case of Adrienne Barbeau for Batman the Animated Series. But to me, this is the closest that you have gotten to Catwoman, even a young Catwoman, since the days of Julie Newmar with Adam West, and I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with that, even though she nailed it, is that some of their chemistry seemed a little off. I began to buy into the chemistry of the two characters by the time the film was reaching its end. Some of the earlier material, it was sort of like, exactly what direction are you heading in with this? It just seemed a little disjointed, but that's neither here nor there. Paul Dano, although I do not like what they did with the Riddler, as the character he played, he was scary. There were elements of the Riddler that were scary. Everybody talked about how unrecognizable Colin Farrell was as the Penguin. It is true that he was unrecognizable. I liked what he did as the Penguin, but at the same time, I wish he had been in the movie a little bit more, but I understand why. Because HBO is giving him his own show as the Penguin. So they're going to unravel a lot of what the cagey bird, as it were, is going to do within the space of cable TV. But overall, I like the movie, and I will say this in closing, at least for this portion of it. Robert Pattinson surprised me. He surprised me as Batman. I liked his Batman, but I hated his Bruce Wayne.
Well said. Well said. Oh, that's it. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'm not going to go any further because I can't without spilling anything out within the spoiler review.
Well, that's it. But you made several key points. The movie, it's a very tough thing to critique. The movie, you're right, emulates movies like Seven, as you said, even like Saw, but Saw done in a much better way. And it puts Batman into that sort of world. And I can't say there's something wrong with that. I cannot, in all fairness, say there's something wrong with that. I could imagine someone wanting to say, you know what, let's put this character in this environment. But is it wrong of me to say, what if someone just said, let's put this character in his environment? Why can't we fight for Batman to be Batman? To be Batman from the comics. Why aren't we getting that in any other format except the animated series is what I'm trying to say. And a little bit, and I think, in my opinion, in the Justice League. Listen, it was a very good movie. I definitely recommend it, and I think most people are going to like it. The internet has deemed that it's supposed to be liked, so it's going to be liked. That's the way it seems to work. I don't disagree with the internet in this stage. I just think they crossed the line with respect to a particular issue, the Waynes. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about some of the when we do the spoiler review, I think you'll point out some of the slight imperfections within the storytelling, within the story. But otherwise, listen, good movie, very, very good movie. Where do I rank it? I think The Joker was an excellent, excellent, excellent movie that blew my mind, even though I don't think it's the Joker that I know, but I think it blew my mind. The Dark Knight blew my mind, even though it's not the Batman, but it blew my mind. This one, I don't think blows my mind. It doesn't, the climactic moments, they don't blow my mind the same way that climactic moments of The Dark Knight, for example, blew my mind. When Commissioner Gordon is arguing with Two-Face about saving his kids, that dramatic moment was very powerful to me. I didn't have that equivalent in the Batman. When the two ships are deciding what they're going to do with the trigger, that scene, you know, to me, it was powerful in a way that I don't have an equivalent scene in this movie. It isn't a criticism. It's kind of like saying you're not as great as the greatest. That's not a criticism, but I do think that The Dark Knight was a much better movie for me, much more exciting movie, much more compelling movie than this movie. So guys, let us know what you think. Join us for the spoiler review. I think Kevin's gonna have a lot more to say on the spoiler review.
To the bat polls, Robin.
Hey guys, welcome to the Dynamic Duo. I'm Franz.
I'm Kevin. Welcome back to Avengers Tower and the Batcave, ladies and gentlemen. We're still here.
Kevin, listen, we just did the review for the Batman. We did the, non-spoiler review, and now we're going to do the spoiler review. So, what have you got to say, my friend, with respect to the Batman from a spoiler review POV?
Okay. Piggybacking on my own material from the non-spoiler review, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this, and I hope you can forgive me, but be objective enough to understand why I'm saying it. I liked the movie and I liked it a lot. And I can accept that this is a new Batman for a new age. I have no real problem with that. But what I have a problem with is something that Franz Captain America pointed out in the non-spoiler review. In all of his wisdom, genius, and creativity, Matt Reeves broke the Batman. And what I mean by broke the Batman, he stripped away the core piece that made Batman Batman.
Yes.
For those of you that have seen the film, I'm referring to the material of Thomas and Martha Wayne. For those of you who haven't seen the material or seen the movie, I am again referring to Thomas and Martha Wayne. In the history of this character, the whole reason why Batman exists was the innocent death of his parents.
Yes.
Within his creative choices, Matt Reeves and the other writer, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, that put together the story and the script, decided that Bruce's parents weren't innocent victims, so to speak. I'm not going to go into every little nuance of what they did and how they did it. And I'm not saying that these two characters, because I realize they're not real, I understand that these two characters don't have to be depicted as saints. But you still have to give them, ladies and gentlemen, enough of a backstory and enough of a history that when they are gone, when they are stripped away from their son, Bruce Wayne, that it drives him to become the Caped Crusader that everybody knows. Whether you're talking Batman from the early days of the comics, whether you're talking the 60s material, whether you're talking the 70s, 80s, all the way up through now, it really doesn't matter what era you're talking about. Batman is still Batman. His reasons for being Batman extend from the death of his parents, and that was stripped away from the movie. So in essence, ladies and gentlemen, and yes, I'm getting carried away, but I'm going to say it, this is not really a Batman movie. It's not even a true comic book movie in spite of the fact that I liked it. I liked the elements of it that were like Seven and that were like Kiss the Girls and whatnot, because I enjoy film noir. But because of what Matt Reeves and company did, they broke the character. There's no reason for him to exist because the innocence he felt as a child does not exist within this new world. He stripped it away. He broke it. The character is done. You're looking at a Batman that in a lot of ways is just as sick, twisted, and misguided as the people that are in Arkham, because his whole existence is based on a lie.
Yes.
And you need to look at the film, in spite of whether or not you enjoy it, you need to look at the film. And if you're a comic book fan, ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand what I mean. This is not really a Batman movie, as I said a few moments ago, and it is absolutely not a comic book film. It has a lot of action in it, but it's not a comic book movie. I walked out, wheeled out of that film saying, okay, I've seen it. I didn't walk out of that movie the way that I did for other Batman films or for other comic book based movies. Yeah. And I'm not comparing one to the other, but I wasn't excited when I left that theater. I wasn't jazzed last night when I left that auditorium. I looked at it as, okay, I've seen another movie. It's another film that when it comes out on DVD, I might buy it. And that was the extent of it. And the reason why I say I might buy it is because so much of it was so turned around and upside down for me that it did, again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, and I'm sorry for going on and on, Franz. This to me is not Batman. It's an interesting interpretation of the world, and I'm able to accept it because of looking at it from a different set of eyes. But if I'm looking at it from the heroic point of, wow, this is a Batman movie, it ain't there.
I listen, I just have to applaud you. I just have to applaud you because I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I was so immersed in what you were saying, I don't even know what to say anymore. Like I forgot my own thoughts.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
to do that. Don't apologize, because you hit it on the nail. And I really believe that you hit it on the nail. Look, we both recognize that this was a well-delivered movie, well-directed, good cinematography, relatively good story, good performances, good look. Batman looked good. We could give it all those accolades. But there are a couple of things, and we could even accept that this is an alternate version of Batman. We could accept that. But there are lines I don't think you should cross, because when you deal with the Martha Wayne situation and Thomas Wayne, you're absolutely correct. And forgive me for reiterating what you've already very well explained. You're destroying the motivation of the character. You're destroying the basis of the character, because how could there be a Batman if his father was not an innocent person? And so what is he fighting for now? Like, what does he represent now? He would have to represent a completely different thing, as opposed to the avenger of an injustice, the avenger of an injustice against the death, the murder of his parents. He'd have to represent something else. Therefore, you're changing the Batman completely. It's one thing to, listen, it's one thing to say, let's envision Batman in a particular setting. I guess it's been done enough. It's been done in the comic books that we can accept that. But it's another thing to deconstruct the character to such an extent that he's no longer who he is. Why make it Batman? You talked about the fact that Disney's going to make a Penguin movie. What relevance does that have to does that have to do with anyone who's a fan of Batman, therefore the Penguin? Because he's Penguin in name only, and barely that. There's no connection to the character. And so other than the suit, the fact that he's wearing a bat suit and that he's being called Batman, this movie, as good as it is, could have been about any character. Like it could have been about anybody. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And in fact, it should have been about another character. It is about another character because this is not Batman. It's a funny thing. I know that some people are going to think we're haters, and we're not coming at this from a hater's point of view. If we were, we would say the movie sucks. If we were, we would criticize a whole bunch of points. I mean, Kevin and I talked about this, and there are certain points in the movie that weren't necessary, that were actual mistakes, but we're not even going to go into those little nitpicky things because overall, the movie worked. The movie worked. But I think the point we're trying to make is that it crossed the line in representing the character. And that's a cheap and a lazy thing to do. I hate to say it, but it's a lazy and it's a cheap thing to do. It's almost dealing in the realm of what if. Kevin, what's happening is that since Frank Miller introduced The Dark Knight Returns, and he introduced us to a Batman that was presented in a way that he hadn't been presented before in the comic books, in a more mature and a more sophisticated way. And we as fans jumped on the bandwagon, and the general public jumped on the bandwagon, and we were like, wow, this is interesting. What happens if you take a superhero and you put him in a more realistic setting? And since then, many other creators have tried to duplicate and replicate that. But here's what they're missing in that. When Frank Miller did it, when Alan Moore did it, they were respectful of not only the material, of the genre, and of the character. Frank Miller didn't reinvent Batman. He didn't change anything in Batman. He just presented Batman in the most dramatic way possible. These new guys that are coming in and reinterpreting the characters are basically saying, let me reinvent the character. And that could be good if your reinvention is genius. But if it's cheap, then it fails. And let me tell you how it could be cheap. These guys are operating from a what-if point of view. It's almost as if, it's like saying, oh, you know what? I have an interesting idea. What if Aunt May, right, was actually responsible for the murder of Peter Parker's parents? That would be an interesting twist. And she was basically raising him, and she's a serial killer who goes around kidnapping kids. And so that's a quote unquote interesting story, but it's a cheap story because I just came up with it on the fly. And why is it a cheap story? It's a cheap story because it deconstructs completely the material that you're working from. It betrays the material that you're working from. Let's do some more. What if Clark Kent's parents were responsible for the destruction of Krypton? Mm-hmm. What if they were the ones? In fact, the truth of the matter is they blew up Krypton because they were terrorists, and so on and so forth. We could come up with a million. Give me the character, and I could give you a what if type of scenario. And this is what it felt like for me. To me, the betrayal of the Waynes. And I realize they're characters, but it was a cheap way of doing it, in a way that deconstructs Batman's motivation to such an extent that it's like, oh, you don't, as you said, you don't get Batman anymore. You don't get Batman anymore. And so, yeah, that crossed the line to me in a way that makes me say, look, I recognize this is a good movie. I recognize that this is well done. I'm not going to hate on it. I'm going to recommend for people to go see it. People could love it all they want. I can't disagree with that. But when I'm hearing, Kevin, reviews on YouTube talking about this is the delivery of Batman, this is the Batman, this is the closest thing to Batman we've ever had, this is the great, I'm like, do you not know the character at all? Like, do you have no respect and no connection to the character at all? You can say this is the greatest movie on the planet. You cannot say this is the greatest Batman on the planet. You can't. One thing that we didn't talk about, and forgive me for going on, is another way that it was a bad delivery is the delivery of Bruce Wayne. It's a complete reinterpretation of the character to such an extent that it's cheap and it doesn't recognize the source material. Yes, take my character and put him in a different scenario and see, let's explore how he would deal with it. But don't reinvent my character. The emo Bruce Wayne that was delivered was out of control. It's so not supposed to be Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, granted, is supposed to be a disguise in a way, but he's supposed to be a billionaire playboy. And he's supposed to have that facade. And here he's a complete emo, and he's emo in the delivery, he's emo in the haircut, he's emo completely emo. And so it's like, bro, that's not Bruce Wayne, and therefore that's not Batman. Visually speaking, there were some scenes that were very, very cool. It looked like Batman interacting with Catwoman. Some of those scenes were really, really, really cool. I disagree a little bit with you. I thought there was tremendous chemistry between Zoe Kravitz and what's his name?
Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson with Batman. I thought there was chemistry there. Zoe Kravitz had chemistry enough to, even if Robert Pattinson was a piece of wood, I think there would have been chemistry there. I mean, she just blew it out of the water. I mean, I don't know how you do that. The way she would just look at him, and from the scene one, I mean, it was just really, really, really well delivered for me. So there were some cool aspects of the movie. There were some really good things of the movie. Last thing that I'll have to say is the emulating the Saw, emulating Seven and Kiss the Girl and things like that. Yes, I get it. Yes. Well delivered. One credit that I'll give also is I like the fact that they had the detective Batman more so than any other of the Batman film. That was a very nice addition. That's something that I would give a really big plus to. But it's not Batman, not the detective aspect, but the Saw aspect, the Seven aspect. It's just not Batman. Yeah, we can be excited and seeing a movie that way with a Batman character in it, but don't sit there and tell me this is Batman. This is the best delivery of Batman. This is the authentic Batman movie. You're jumping on a bandwagon that shows and exposes you as not understanding the character whatsoever. Forgive me for going on, my friend.
Before we say good night, goodbye, and close the Batcave, I have to point out, I'm not forgiving Matt Reeves for what he did with the Alfred character. I'm not going to go into it, but I did not like that. To me, it served absolutely no purpose within the story. It was just one of those things of, let's shake it up by doing this in terms of artistically and whatnot for the sake of the character. And ladies and gentlemen, before we depart or before Franz has any additional closing remarks, I want to point out something to a lot of the internet and anyone that is set to go see this movie in the coming weeks. And you need to consider this regardless of the setting, the story, and all concerned. And this is an important thing, okay? And it really is, ladies and gentlemen. Regardless of the ins and outs, as far as who's directing, who's writing, what story style you're doing, or what have you, Batman is supposed to be, and has always been, a hero. Yes. Okay? That's first and foremost. Yeah. Within that space, and I'm not trying to be a prude or upset anybody, but I want to point out one major thing to the entire world, if need be, via the web. There are Batman toys and all kinds of merchandise that's currently on the market and has been associated with every Batman movie that's ever been done, okay? Or going back to every Batman comic book that's ever been created. There's always been merchandise. In this particular case, I think we're getting into a very dangerous area because this film is rated PG-13. And having seen it last night, I'm going to tell you flat out, this is not a kid's movie. And I think there is a twisted line that we shouldn't cross and can't cross when it comes down to not only superheroes, but a whole lot of the stuff that's out here. Whether it's Star Wars characters, whether it's superheroes, whether it's cartoon characters, these various companies have created the merchandise. But ladies and gentlemen, most of the kids that the merchandise is pushed toward, take a moment to think, they can't go see the movie. But you've got Hot Wheels, you've got figurines, you've got games, you've got video games that's all meant for that younger child audience. But they can't go see the movie. Or shouldn't go see it.
Shouldn't go see it, yes.
Ask yourself a question. What message is that sending? You've taken a traditional character, comic book or not, and one that was always meant to enlighten and engage and entertain kids and teenagers and adults, yes. But we have jumped so far over that bridge, over the broom, and off the deep end that we've forgotten what we're doing.
We have. It's one thing to have alternate versions, but when you lose the baseline, when you lose the baseline, and that's what's happened. The baseline Batman is gone, my friend. Like we don't even recognize that there is a baseline Batman. He is he's been, what I mean by baseline Batman is the superhero. Like, why can't someone be brave? All these geniuses who are coming up with different alternative versions of, let's put Batman in these dark scenarios and so on. Why can't we have a genius that says, let's have a superhero Batman with the superhero drama, with the culmination of the fight, the beauty of the delivery of the action of the fight? We get it in anime, as I talked about it when I talked about Attack on Titans. We get it in, and even video games, like the little snippets of video games that we see of Batman fighting the Terminator. Why can't we have that delivery? Because that's the genre. That's what attracted us to the character in the first place. Why can't someone be brave enough to deliver that as opposed to the interpretations? I don't mind the interpretations, and if you love your interpretations, that's fine. That's on you. The problem is when the interpretation is replacing the baseline, is replacing the character. That's what I have a problem with. Because in my opinion, and I think in your opinion, that baseline is stronger than everything else that has come before or since. It is stronger. It is the basis on which everything else comes from. So why wouldn't you go there? We did a show on What Would We Do, Kevin Feige and so on and so forth. Well, let me tell you something. As Kevin Feige is thinking about doing the Fantastic Four, and I don't mean to change the subject, Fantastic Four, X-Men, and so on and so forth, I would implore him to go to the source. When I mean the source, I mean the juice of it, the marrow of it. Go back. If you're going to do the Fantastic Four, please don't do one of the recent comics that have come, storylines that have come out within the past 10 years. Go back to the 1960s Kirby and Stan Lee stories. We may think they're garbage because we may think we're more sophisticated than that, but we're wrong. Those stories are absolute genius, and they're the reason we're even talking about the Fantastic Four today. That's what needs to be explored, because that's the story that can be enjoyed by both the kids and the adults. As you said, right now, you can't take a 5-year-old to watch that Batman movie. What the hell is he trying to do? Like, why would you do that? And last thing I'm going to say is the betrayal of Thomas Wayne, the misrepresentation of Batman, but also the supporting cast, the rogues gallery, the changing of the Riddler to such an extent it's throwing away completely, like rewashing the material completely. No acknowledgement, no recognition of what came before. And again, that's fine, but please don't say this is the representation. Please don't say that. And I understand where it's coming from. And the last thing I'm going to say, and I know I've said this is the last thing I'm going to say many times, but it comes from our shame and our embarrassment of this material, Kevin. It comes from us being kids, being told, you still read comic books. Comic books are silly. What are you, stupid for reading comic books? And we want to be legitimate, and we want to be able to say, oh, look, this material is as good as anything else. And so because of that, we run away from the material, and we applaud when a character like the Riddler is transformed into something that is absolutely and utterly different than what he was ever intended to be.
He's too close to the Joker right now.
I mean, even more than that, I would say it's not even. I mean, there's nothing comic booky or superhero at all about it. He's more like a Seven character than he is of any kind of superhero character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It's that the presentation of him. There's nothing comic book villain about it. There's more serial killer-ish about it. You know, and so that's not the genre. That's not the genre. But anyway, it is what it is, guys. Listen, I hope you understand where we're coming from. And I hope you pick up that we said this is a good movie. And I hope you remember that we said we complimented the positive aspects. And perhaps we should have the caveat to say, this is our opinions as fans. I support this movie. I want it to do well. As a fan, it didn't tickle my fancy. I'm not saying I hate it. It didn't tickle my fancy. It didn't make me go, oh, ho, 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 which is why I want to go to a superhero movie. And you know, let me say this. The Joker blew me away. It tickled my fancy. I know it didn't do the same thing to you, Kevin, but the Joker tickled my fancy because the movie was so good and so good. Batman, as good as it was, the Batman, as good as it was, didn't completely. I walked away saying, yeah, that was good. That was good. That was very good. So let us know what you think. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, don't forget to disagree if you disagree, and join us next time on the Bat Cave and the Avengers Tower, everybody.
Take care, folks.